Welcome to this session on teaching kindness in schools. Glad to have you all here. We've got three great speakers for you today. I will introduce them just before they give their talk, and then they can give their talk, and then we can do some questions and answers at the end. If you've got questions for the speakers, comments, please, you can either put them in the chat box or in the Q&A box. If you're watching via the YouTube channel, then you can add questions to that, and we've got a team of people which are collecting those together for us to be able to put them back to the speakers at the end of the talks. Unfortunately, Dr. Wadchara can't join us for the live session. We do have a presentation from Dr. Wadchara, which we'll be able to show. And if you have any questions for him, then we'll be able to get them to him and get back to you at a later date. So we will kick off. First of all, we will kick off. We've got Laura Chepner from the Vegan Society. Just to give you a bit of background on Laura. Laura is the Education Officer and the Chair of the Education Network at the Vegan Society in the UK. Prior to that, Laura was the UK's first vegan inclusion education consultant, working to support educators and vegan learners in all aspects of education, and is also the author of an educator's guide for vegan inclusive teaching, the first of its kind guidebook. Now, Laura, I heard you speak at the Educators Conference organised from Canada, Humane Educators Conference, and I was very impressed with your talk. So I'm looking forward to listening to you again. And it's very close to my heart as well, because I've got kids in school in the UK, and I'm always battling with them for vegan inclusiveness. So, Laura, I'll pass the floor over to you to tell us all about your work.
Thank you so much. What a lovely introduction, Dave. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Now, I have to apologise for the background noise. I'm actually in a setting with children and who I'm working with later, and they have just turned on some loud music. So I do apologise, but we are talking about kindness in classrooms, and there's a lot of kindness in the classroom downstairs. So yes, I'll try and speak as loudly and as clearly as I can to avoid any interruptions. So I'm just going to share my screen. It's absolutely wonderful so far to have heard all the speakers leading up to this session. So yes, I'm the Education Officer at the Vegan Society. I'll just give you a brief background as to what led me to this position, although you've heard some from Dave there. I was a primary school teacher myself in a former life, and when I became vegan, I left the profession because I just felt as though my ethics clashed with the curriculum here in the UK too much. And it wasn't until my daughter started school herself 4 years later that I kind of had this internal battle of how can I be comfortable with her learning a curriculum that I'm uncomfortable teaching myself. And so I took it upon myself to go into her school and start a relationship with them, because they didn't understand what veganism was. They didn't understand why they had to provide food for her. And perhaps edit their curriculum. And so the more I went in with them and the more I worked with them, the more I realized that there may very well be a need out there for other vegan parents to have someone speak to their children's schools. And so that's what I did. I put myself out there on social media and I asked the question to other vegan parents in social media groups. Would you like some help from someone who was a former teacher and now vegan to come in and speak to your children's school? And it was, whoa, this absolute barrage of tens and tens of people just saying, yes, come to my school. And so that's where it all started, really. And I coined the phrase vegan inclusive education because in England, especially, we have inclusion as a very big thing that we do in schools to ensure that every child can access learning. So I developed a staff training session where I could go in and speak to staff not only to show them why they should be vegan inclusive, but also to show them how. So what I'm going to do today with you is just talk you through what I say to them to give you an idea of how I promote a vegan inclusive classroom, which is also a kind classroom, which is also a caring classroom. But I use the term vegan inclusive because I feel as though vegan children, as well as being kind and compassionate, also have a right to be protected and be included. So I'm going to talk about how I tell schools why they should be vegan inclusive. I show them how they can be vegan inclusive, and then I'll finish by showing you, as I show them, the benefits of a vegan inclusive classroom for everyone. So the first thing that I show them is that in the United Kingdom, we are protected by human rights law as vegans. There are characteristics of human rights law. And because veganism is considered a belief, we are on a par with religion. So if a teacher is going to make provisions and make changes for somebody of a specific religion, then they should also be doing it for someone with a belief. And the reason why I show this to the staff, first of all, is to give them a real sense of just how important it is to be vegan inclusive. And all around the world, people are protected by Human Rights Commission laws. And so it's not just necessarily in the UK where we have rights. So it's good to point that out for any of you who are listening from around the world. So what do I say to them about why schools should be vegan inclusive? Well, I explain to them that veganism is a philosophy, that veganism is more like humanism than it is the Atkins diet. And I talk to them about the animal rights aspect, the environmental aspect, the human health aspect, and social justice, which to this audience, I feel as though I'd be preaching to the converted if I went into more detail on those. But when I go into a classroom, the teachers don't know this. They don't understand what veganism is. They really genuinely believe that it's just about food. They don't understand that we love animals and see them as equals. I refer to them as non-human animals, which for them is quite bizarre. It's the first time they will have heard it. But in this first session, I believe it's so important to just lay down the fact that they have a right by public sector duty, and that they also should sincerely understand and deeply know why a vegan child or a vegan family has decided to become vegan. And when that penny drops and they say, oh, right, okay, it's not just a diet, they sometimes feel ashamed of the way that they have behaved. So if they've ignored a parent's ask for perhaps you cancel a chick hatchery, or they've ignored a learner's request for please don't make me dissect a frog, they do feel as though, oh, I can't believe I've been doing this wrong all this time. And you will all know that any teacher who is worth their salt, who is a good teacher and who wants to make a good difference, they will then want to go on and make as many changes as they possibly can. Then we play a little bit of a game. This is just a brain break. I like to dispel stereotypes. So because they've had quite a heavy first third of the session, I then put down loads of pictures of celebrities and I ask them to put them into two piles, those who they believe are vegan and those who believe aren't vegan. And the coup is that they all are, all of them are vegan. So this just shows them again that it's the diversity within the vegan community, that it can be anyone from anywhere who just wants to be kind to animals and kind to the environment and kind to themselves. And it lightens the mood from me just telling them that they could be breaking the law and that they could be indirectly discriminating if they aren't vegan inclusive for the children in their care. So they begin to like me a little bit more and they think, okay, so she's got a point. And then I move on to how they can be vegan inclusive in their everyday practice. Because those of you who are teachers or who live with teachers or who just fondly admire teachers as I do, you'll know that they are very, very busy people with lots and lots to get through and lots of demands. Here in the United Kingdom, we have Ofsted, who are the regulators that come in and check that schools are doing what they should be. And inclusion is a huge thing on their list. And so I feel as though if they're going to do it right, I need to show them how. So there's a long list here of all of the areas that I found when working with my daughter's school and from having been a teacher where non-human animals feature predominantly. And I ask this school to change their practice in these areas. So because the list is long, it's quite endless, and I've only got, just short of 10 minutes left. What I've done for you guys is I've just picked out kind of the ones that come up most frequently when parents contact me to say that the schools don't understand me and the school don't understand my children. And I'll talk you through what I ask of the educators. So firstly, when it comes to their curriculum planning each year, which involves going on school trips, I asked them the question, does your curriculum include the use and abuse of non-human animals? Do you have topics that talk about zoos, that talk about aquarium, that celebrate these as places that children should go to and love and enjoy? And what I do is I highlight to them that, yes, children love animals. They have an innate love for non-human animals, for other animals. But shouldn't we be teaching them about their natural habitats, those habitats that are under threat currently? Wouldn't it be lovely if a child grew up having learned from school that a pond or a forest or an ocean, all of these habitats were so precious and needed to be loved and saved and protected, instead of, shouldn't we go to the zoo and look at unhappy animals? And so I'm starting to get the teachers to think about things from the non-human animals perspective, but also explaining to them that this will create a kinder classroom, because don't we want our children to love other animals? And I have created a lot of resources and do continue to create a lot of resources that I can then hand to them with planning based around the swamp or the forest, for example. So I'm not just saying I would like you to do this. What I do is I show them how also. Then I taught them about their songs. So we have quite a few songs and nursery rhymes in the United Kingdom that have been around for hundreds of years, and they're old fashioned. There's one called Three Blind Mice that you might be aware of, where a farmer chops off tails from three blind mice with a carving knife. And it's a lovely rhyming song, but it's actually quite violent. And it comes from a long time ago, where if you had a mouse or a mice problem in your larder and they destroyed your food, then it would be a horrible thing to have happen. So I understand back in the day that they would want to chop the tails off to scare the mice away. However, we have refrigeration now. And I say this to the educators, it's a different world that we live in. Can you be more modern? Can you work with the children to create new ones? Do you have to sing about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, once I caught a fish alive? Or could you create something else? Let the children do it with you. Because why on earth would we want to talk about violence in a classroom with young children? And of course, if there's more than one way to skin a cat, then there's more than one way to peel an orange. I find that language is so important, and I stress this to them over and over again when I ask them to create this vegan, inclusive, kinder classroom. And with regards to science, so I asked them the question, are you teaching a balanced curriculum that does not exploit live non-human animals? Do you bring in butterfly hatcheries? Do you bring in chick hatcheries? Wouldn't it be more exciting to watch these non-human animals in their natural habitats doing what they do best? And could you use technology, or could you use any kind of exciting and creative way to show that animals have a life cycle as well as us? They are just other animals. We're all the same. I talk about materials that they use in classrooms. There are some schools who talk about you have to wear leather shoes, you have to use this glue and this beeswax. But in actual fact, I show them that there are cheaper alternatives, and I show them where online they can buy these. Then I highlight lunchtime. So I talk about, are you offering a nutritious plant-based option each day? Can your vegan children sit with their peers and enjoy lunchtime, which is the most sociable time of the day? In the United Kingdom, we have a special dietary request form. I asked the teachers if they ever heard of that, because most vegan parents don't know it exists, and most teachers don't know it exists. So even if the teacher was an advocate for the vegan children, would they know how to speak to the caterers about this? And also the LASA, who are our school food services kind of governing body here in the UK, this year released a plant-based recipe book for the first time ever, which just shows how great it is that vegan food is being considered. But there's still a long way to go in this country where vegan children, because it's not mandated by law, are still being refused vegan food. And again, I mentioned here about, do you remember that discrimination that we spoke about at the beginning? If you don't provide vegan food at lunchtime or vegan snacks when you're making Halloween biscuits, etc., for Christmas and so on, for all the major festivals, then you are indirectly discriminating. So I bring them back to remembering why someone's vegan for the non-human animals and why it's important that you become vegan inclusive. And then I talk about policies, because at the end of the day, there needs to be a top-down process where the senior leadership teams say, we are going to add the word vegan into our policy somewhere to show that we see it as a belief, and a belief worth catering to, worth changing our daily practice for. And I list them this example here, where I also talk about the Board of Governors needing to know their public sector equality duty and the legal protection of vegans. And then I tell them that I can come in and do training annually to ensure that any new staff who come in will be up to date, and I will support them. Because what I want to do is foster a good relationship, I think it's the third or fourth point down, between the vegans and the non-vegans in the school. Yes, we need things to change so that vegan children can learn safely and comfortably. But more than anything, let's learn from each other. Let's foster this great relationship in schools between the vegans and the non-vegans, so that even the vegan curious might feel more comfortable making that leap or making that switch if they know that they're going to be supported by the school and that it's actually in the policy. And of course, I explained to them that the Ofsted regulators would absolutely love this, and how wonderful it would seem and appear that they go above and beyond for vegan children in their settings. And then I finally finish with a Q&A with them. But I say, if you become vegan inclusive, it will not only benefit the vegan children, it will benefit everybody. And I talk about the fact that, you know, if they offer vegan food, that means everybody has access to plant-based options, which are healthy. If they change their language to eliminate violence and talk about animals as non-human animals or other animals, then wouldn't that be lovely, so that we start speaking more kindly to each other? And this creates that deeper understanding of they are just like us. Wouldn't it be lovely to reinforce that love, that innate love that children are born with for non-human animals? I mean, when we talk about the Jeffrey Dahmer, I think it's on Netflix program that's on at the minute. There are other channels available. You know, he started his kind of awful obsession with hurting animals. Well, I know it's quite extreme perhaps for me to say something like that, but if we could prevent that from happening because we remind teachers that children have an innate love for animals, wouldn't that be great? And maybe avoid more violence as they grow. Wouldn't it be wonderful for them to have more of an appreciation for nature and the realization of that responsibility, that a tree is not just a tree is a home, it's a habitat, it's protection, it's wonderful, and that they have a network where they all speak to each other underground, and shouldn't they be loved, and shouldn't we just take care of our planet? And inclusivity, my favorite word, again, as I've mentioned, not just for the vegan, but also the vegan curious. And the teachers, the educators themselves, they get newer and more relevant topics. Sustainability is high up on the agenda at the moment. And by teaching a vegan inclusive curriculum that takes into account the environment, then you know, they're also ticking those boxes of modern and relevant topics. And of course, as I've mentioned, there is nothing bad that can come from the elimination of any setting, and especially with children who are so innocent, just like other animals. And I absolutely love being in a setting where initially these adults in the room have been so conditioned by the education that they've had that they at first didn't even understand veganism as a concept. And now what I've done is I've taught them what veganism is, why a vegan child has chosen to do so. Then I've shown them how they can make simple, effective changes to their curriculum and how I want to help them do that. And I also say to them, it's going to happen over time. This is not going to be a quick fix. And then at the end, when we talk it through and we've got rid of those misconceptions, that basically what they're going to go forward with is a more humane, holistic and kinder classroom. And that is what we're all about here. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've gained some insight into the work that I do. And please feel free to reach out to me in the future if you ever feel there could be a collaboration or you'd like some help with anything. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Laura. That was really informative and really great, and great to see that initiative coming from you and from the Vegan Society and taking that to the schools. And I'm sure we'll have some questions to explore that a little bit in more detail towards the end of the session. Okay, carrying on. Our second speaker, unfortunately, as we said at the start, couldn't join us live. It's Dr. Wadchara from Thailand. Just to give a little introduction before his pre-recorded speech, Dr. Wadchara is the infectious disease specialist from the Bumrungrad Grand International Hospital. He's also a TV program host and has founded the organization called Catalyst with the mission to promote animal rights, improve animal welfare, and catalyze the plant-based diet movement. So we should have Dr. Wadchara's pre-recorded presentation.
Thank you, the organizer, for inviting me to speak today. I am Dr. Wadchara Pumpradit, an Executive Director of Catalyst. Catalyst is a social enterprise company focuses on animal welfare and plant-based diet movement in Thailand and beyond. Today I'd like to share with you our vegan school lunch program by the name of Good Food for All. Now, as you are well aware of, plant-based diet has benefits on human health, environment, and animals. In our program, we not only focuses on plant-based diet or vegan diet, but we actually emphasized on what we call whole food plant-based diet. Whole food means unprocessed or minimally processed, no added sugar, no added oil, and no animal products, no meat, no dairy, no eggs. And that's the definition of whole food plant-based diet, because whole food plant-based diet has been shown to be the best diet in terms of diseases protection, health promotion, and health treatment. Now, we're talking about Thailand setting. Animal compassion has been a widely accepted principles in Thailand, partly due to Buddhism. However, compassion towards farm animals or animal raised for food has been largely forgotten for a long time, even though it has been in the principle of Buddhism 2,000 years ago. However, we work on Good Food for All with comprehensive approach by using One Health, One Welfare, One Planet approach, or human health, animals, and the environment. But we intentionally in this program chose to establish a partnership with the Ministry of Education under the department which works on cultivating morality in young people. Obviously, our colleagues around the world launches program on Meatless Monday or Meatless Friday, using human health and environment as the leading reasons. But really like to pilot our work on using compassion as a leading reason, also together with human health and then also planetary health as well. In our school lunch program, we focus of our energy on teacher as a primary change agent. And, luckily, the Ministry of Education in Thailand bought the concept that vegan school lunch project can be, a good link to farms animal compassion. And that is something that they actually want to cultivate in young people as well. In the past, I'm sorry. Now, in the past 2 years, we have conducted many activities in terms of educating teachers in Thailand on plant-based diet. We conducted series of short courses training on plant-based diet, as you can see here. These are example of our short course. There are, a lot of views and a lot of participants. The first one was 4,000 teachers. The second one was actually got 16,000 teachers participated in our short course training. We also talked a lot about compassion towards farm animals as well. We also launched what we call a national teacher training program on plant-based diet. This is a 20 hours online course for teachers and teachers. Once they complete our course, they will go on and implement the Meatless Friday program in their schools or in their communities, right? Now, when the teachers complete a program and receive a certification of completion, they can use this certification and as their academic upgrade and then also increase in salary. So on the left-hand side, those are the online courses that we conducted. And then on the right-hand side are samples of menus they serve in the Meatless Friday program. So far, we have done about 3 batches of teachers. We are going through the 4th batch of teachers training program. Up to now, we have trained about 1,200 teachers nationwide on plant-based diet and farm animal compassion. Over 20 schools, I would say maybe 25 to about 30 schools up to date have participated in Meatless Friday program as well. With this pilot program, we are now expanding our Meatless Friday program or Good Food for All to 50 more schools in the next 1 year. This is going to be a different model. Some schools will be in big city like in Bangkok. Some schools are in the south where the culture is very different. So we like to try to expand to various different cultural schools in Thailand, both Buddhist school or other religious schools as well. On top of that, we like to build youth leaders being mindful that peer-to-peer education is as important as educating teachers. So these youth leaders that we're going to build, about 50 to 100 leaders throughout the whole nations, will go on and spread the message about plant-based diet to their peers, to their schools, and then to their communities and parents as well. The youth leaders we are targeting will be a secondary school level. We also introducing the program on carbon credit revenues to these schools first time in Thailand as a way to show students how their plates and what they eat can actually help reducing carbon emission and then also help the planet. And as you can see, not only the youth leaders, but we want to actually build the youth club or plant-based youth club in schools as well. We hope to get about 10 to 20 clubs in Thailand in the next 1 year. And the club will come up with their work. How could they, motivate their schools to have plant-based options? or motivate their parents to go, meatless Friday in their home, or educating their communities about how plant-based diet is linked to human health, linked to global warming, and then also animal compassion. Lesson learned from our program in the past 2 years are the following. Number one, sympathy towards farm animals has been forgotten, but appropriate stimulation can reactivate the compassion. Uh, Number two would be compassion is a universal value, but it needs to be tailor-made to local cultures. However, environmental protection is a trend which we animal rights activists should utilize in our strategic approach because young people tend to accept environmental protection as a good trend and they like to start plant-based diet because they want to protect their planet, right? Now, number three would be there has been lots of concerns and misunderstanding, I would say, in plant-based diet in terms of protein inadequacy, right? Especially from the medical or healthcare professionals. Therefore, going forward, it is vital that we need to educate healthcare professionals, medical professionals, and parents in terms of plant-based diet and emphasize the fact that plant-based diet is actually good for all ages and it actually can deliver a very good nutritional to their children. So by having a good understanding of plant-based diet from healthcare professionals, from parents, it would be an important piece of success in terms of getting our program going forward. So those are, a short description of our program in the past 2 years. I welcome any questions you may have. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much to Dr. Wadchara. Unfortunately, as we said, he's not here with us today. But if we do have any questions, if anybody does have any questions, then we can get them to Dr. Wadchara and then we can come back to you. We can get the answers and come back to you. Okay. Our third speaker, we're very honoured to have with us Dr. Linda Tolberg, who's going to be talking about a slightly different subject than the first two speakers, which is concentrated more on the traditional children in schools. And he's going to be talking more about inclusiveness within the business school environment. Dr. Linda Tolberg, as a way of introduction, is the Assistant Professor in Management and Organisation at Hanken School of Economics in Finland. Dr. Linda's PhD research studied the caring-killing paradox in animal work through an embodied autoethnography working as an animal shelter worker in Australia. And Dr. Tolberg has published academic articles and chapters on multi-species work and well-being, animal stakeholdership and voice, multi-species research methods and teaching. And Dr. Tolberg is managing editor at the multidisciplinary peer-reviewed journal Society and Animals and the editor of the Oxford Handbook of Animal Organisation Studies, which is currently in press, which creates a new field for animal inclusion into the traditionally anthropocentric field of business. So it's with great pleasure we hand the floor to you, Dr. Tolberg, to tell us all about your work.
Thank you so much, Dave. Thank you for that lovely introduction, and I'm so pleased and honored to be here today. Thank you to the organizers. I'm just going to share my presentation, so bear with me for a second. Hopefully you can see my presentation and hear me okay. So as Dave mentioned, I work in a business school, and my presentation today is going to take you a little bit more into the higher education field, specifically, business schools, because this is an area where animal ethics usually doesn't really figure very heavily. Just a few words about myself. Dave mentioned that in my PhD, I studied the caring-killing paradox of animal shelter work. And this was actually not something I set out to study. I always say I'm an accidental academic because I never thought to venture into this field. There was nothing about animal ethics or caring-killing paradox or even animals in business when I started studying. So my motivation and I guess passion for animals was when I became a vegan in 2007. That really shifted how I saw things, how I looked at research, how I looked at what was being taught to myself and what I was being asked to teach. And in my context, it was in the business school. So my agenda up till now, since then, has really been about trying to make an inclusive space, like Laura mentioned. You know, this inclusivity is really key, not only for veganism, but specifically for non-human animals, to be featured not only in curriculums, but also in teaching examples and role modeling behavior. So what I will be talking about today is just one snapshot of something that I've done and have published on, to give you a little bit of a taste of what we've been trying to do. And I'm really excited about being in this session because I'm hoping to gather great ideas, and I've already heard so many wonderful examples of things that I could look into more. So yes, so I'll just start off with a couple of contextual things. Oh, there we go. So one of the things that is important, I guess, when we talk about the business school is to understand that, and when we're talking about the business school, we're talking about universities that teach economics or business subjects. So I teach at the moment, I'm a researcher and a teacher here in Finland at a business school called Hanken School of Economics. It's a triple accredited business school, which means that we're among the top in the world. And this creates certain pressures as well as certain curriculum issues when it comes to introducing topics that are not traditionally seen as important within a economic or business education. So animal ethics and even food ethics, or ethics overall, when we're talking about business ethics, which is a course that I've taught previously, is not something that is considered very important, even in today's world. As previous speakers have mentioned, there is a way in through sustainability courses. But even within these sustainability courses, they're extremely environmentally focused. And of course, that's a way in. But even with that, it's very, very small. And so these issues are basically non-existent in the curriculum. One of my key issues one of my key motivations for staying in the business school rather than going to another type of institution is that I believe that business graduates are really important future decision makers. our students, they go and work in companies, they go and work in different decision-making roles, both in private and public institutions. And so how they see non-human animals and how they see ethics is really important to how it then impacts animal industries and our societal treatment of non-human animals. So human activities, especially commercial ones, such as in the business school, what we're teaching them, are really important to how we then affect life on this planet. And so the challenge, I guess, today for business schools is really to, as another scholar said, is own up to the role we play in creating the problems that society now faces. First, through the courses that we teach, the theories that we espouse, and the values that we profess. So, of course, a teacher or a researcher in a business school environment has a specific privileged position in terms of what the values are that we teach to our students. And so a lot of them, unfortunately, still to this day, are very outdated profit maximization ideologies. So kindness and compassion, these things are very rare in our curriculum. As I mentioned before, we're strictly governed by these accreditation schemes and other governance protocols of what we can actually teach. So it then becomes a kind of activist approach of how can we get these topics into the business school, into curriculum, while still adhering to these schemes. And so what this research that I did on trying to put this into a course, I've done it in multiple courses, but the one I'll tell you a little bit more about in a second, is really based on these three interrelated questions of how can we as teachers and learners first engage together with these uncomfortable realities regarding food production and consumption. How can we as teachers design learning experiences that consider rights and experiences of animals in the food industry within these disciplinary confines of a typically business school curriculum or whatever curriculum it is in a higher educational sphere? And is there really a place for activist perspectives in teaching these types of subjects? And if so, how can we harness this compassionate activism while still retaining criticality? Because of course, we're not just guest speakers in these courses. This is our work environment. And so it becomes a little bit of a balancing act also as faculty. And so one way to do it is to come in as a guest into somebody else's course. And so still working from the inside as an academic. And what I did a couple of years ago, you can see a picture there of my colleague, Professor Lisa Välikangas. I met her at a climate strike in 2019 for universities, and well, we were there on, as university faculty, not in a professional sense, but out of our own ambition. And I had a course the day before where I had tried to talk about animal ethics in my own course. And I asked the students to please come to this demonstration outside, that's the Finnish parliament, and not a single student came. And so I tried to think about, well, what can I do to make it more attractive for students to actually think about these things? Because in the business school, it's very so-called neutral, although it's not neutral in any way, shape, or form. But when it comes to emotions, compassion, and kindness, it's seen as not something to be discussed in the business school. And so I met Lisa there, and we started thinking, well, how could we change things from the inside out? And so she was teaching a course called Tackling World Challenges across 3 different business schools. So it was Finland, Sweden, and Switzerland. And the course really focused on food as a world challenge. There was no aspects of animal ethics within it. It wasn't a big course. It only had 37 students, but 3 faculty members. And my audience of students are usually in their mid-20s. And in this course as well, they were from all around the world, really. And what I did was, because I wasn't involved in this master business class as a formal faculty member, I could then use my position as an academic, yet as an activist academic, to perhaps push the boundaries a little bit more than what is usual. So I designed a session based on street activism methods, where the students were asked to watch Dominion, which I'm sure many of you have heard, have seen. So they were asked to watch that about a couple of weeks before this actual session. And then they got to reflect on the aspects. And so I also had alternative learning materials, so they could choose the Game Changers or Cowspiracy, which at the time were the alternatives that were perhaps, I mean, they're less graphic. And there were also self-care instructions for students regarding their well-being, and a pre-class academic reading I had for them to give them this verbal account as well as the visual account. Important to point out is that none of them were mandatory, because again, like I said before, there are these accreditation aspects. It's not a formal topic for the business school. So it was really designed as a freestanding task, and there were no assessments tied to the session. And then in the session, when I discussed this with the students, I complemented everything with academic publications, contextualizing it on a theoretical framework. And so what I realized from this experience was that there's a great need of teaching with compassion and fierce compassion. And how I see fierce compassion is really that it requires a level of intensity, action, and courage from the teacher to actually handle their own feelings and beliefs about the topic, while still guiding the students in this critical inquiry of their own emotions and thoughts about it. And then balancing this with, what when you witness something that's incredibly upsetting for most of us. And balancing that with, okay, what does this mean then for business professionals? What does it mean for students who are studying things that very often can be seen as exploitation in many shapes and forms, not only for non-human animals, but other marginalized humans and groups around the world. So really encouraging students to start developing these post-anthropocentric values and considerations, and opening their eyes to looking at, okay, what are these decisions? How are these constructs? And like Laura mentioned before, language, really important. How do we talk about suffering? How do we talk about non-human animals in the business school? So really trying to lift these things up in a classroom situation. One thing that's also key is that really in the business school, especially, I would say, is that teaching social justice topics, which I believe non-human animal ethics is quite demanding and uncomfortable for most individuals there, because it is so rare and because we get a lot of pushback. I won't go into this approach here, but it's 3 layers. So courageously witnessing, inquiring with empathy, and prompting positive action. And please, Dave, stop me if I go over time. But I'll go a little bit into these different layers. So it's really about embracing this ethos of academic activism, blending it with effective experiences and critical thinking in order to come to an area of positive change. So here's screenshots from Dominion showing business as usual. And I used a multi-layer approach also in terms of who can I actually make or encourage to courageously witness what the reality is. Publishing this, I also looked at it as scholar activism to engage the reviewers, the editors, and co-authors of my article to actually witness and reflect. So I was very thankful to Chris Delforce from Aussie Farms at the time, but now Farm Transparency Project, who was the executive producer of Dominion, who allowed me to take screenshots and create these collages so that even making the researchers, the editors, those who decide what research is published, to witness and think about these things that usually don't feature within business studies. And so from a student's perspective, I put some quotes there from the students. One student said, in the supermarket aisles, you're not confronted with pictures. Instead, you see happy cows, you know, but when watching Dominion, I closed my eyes. I couldn't watch the reality anymore. And so not considering these possibilities of systemic institutional suffering in food systems that are very far away usually makes it then a topic of non-consideration. So really had never been presented as a topic of concern for future business professionals. So fierce compassion is also about inquiring with empathy. So moving towards an empathetic inquiry. So using effective and embodied knowledge to inform and contextualize what they're hearing, what they're understanding. So this is where the academic literature is really important. So here, for example, a case study I made for them in class about affected ignorance in dairy. Almost nobody in the class could tell me where milk came from. They didn't understand, even though people in their mid-20s, the impacts of the dairy industry. And so really trying to understand the underlying marketing, cultural, legal, cognitive dissonance aspects of understanding this aspect of food production. So then we come to, well, what can we do if we know that we've seen the issues, we see the contextual understanding from a theoretical point of view. So how can we prompt positive action? And so here I had many examples from the students telling me about, you know, how they had taken the materials out of the classroom, talked to friends, talked to their housemates. One wanted to do his master's thesis on this topic. And I gave them some resources, some vegan resources, and explained a little bit about lifestyle, but mostly role modeling, because to be honest, they hadn't met many vegan teachers in the business school. So this is really what I mean when talking about scholar activism in teaching. So from the inside out, how can we include these topics in the classroom? How can we make this part of business professionals' trainings? And how can we challenge the effective ignorance that really, especially in certain contexts, such as what I see often, how can we change those narratives? So really need to reflect on and recognize our own authority as teachers, to engage with these uncomfortable topics in a context which does not often support this type of critical looking. So there's a lot of lack of teaching materials, as Dave mentioned. I've recently published this book. It's now out last month, the Oxford Handbook of Animal Organizational Studies, where I try to, it's got over 40 different authors from around the world. So what we try to do there is to create a book that's specific for the business school or people who are interested in these types of this type of field, but really collaborations with non-business actors it's really, really important, because there's not very many of us in this area. So really looking at how can we bring validity to these topics through inclusion. How can we use our academic privileges, both as students and as teachers, to encourage this better future? And how can we, create more humane business societies and curriculum built in compassionate values for all lives? And can you help us to do this? And can you help facilitators, teachers in your area in business to teach them that this is an important topic for business graduates to look at? Because again, many will be decision makers in these companies and in these organizations, but also, of course, as individuals. So not only as a professional role. So I'm really, really grateful for any questions you have. And if you want to check out the article, then please do so. And looking forward to hearing more question-wise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Linda. That was really fascinating, and a completely different angle to what many of us have seen before. So I think with some of the comments, people were really opening their eyes to the opportunities there of actually engaging more at the with the business school and those future leaders, where many of us may have concentrated more at young children in the past. So a really good opportunity for us to learn more from you, and hopefully, as you say, to help you as well to continue to develop this really, really important part of your work. So yeah, really, really fascinating. Okay, we've got about 15-20 minutes, so just looking at some questions. I've got some questions to ask. There's some questions that we've got in from some of the participants as well. Just sticking with you, Linda, have you been in talks with business schools in other countries about the possibility of expanding your work into any other places?
Wow, I wish. Nobody's very interested in this. It really is. It's like going uphill. It's an uphill battle. I was 8 years in Australia working at Griffith Business School, Griffith University there, which is a big business school. I was not able there to bring any of these aspects in. So, but I'd love to, and it's part of the work that I will be doing forward now, hopefully. But this is something that's difficult because none of this is encouraged from a professional point of view. So all of this is in my spare time.
Wow.
So it becomes for many individuals quite a lot then, and that's why I really focus on this being my activist part. But I would love to work more with other business schools. Yes.
Great, thanks, Linda. Apologies for some background noise. Somebody just started to do some work outside here, so apologies if you're getting the sound of a pneumatic drill. Yeah, just picking up on that, I think I would like to talk to you some more about whether there's any way that we can collaborate, because I think just from my work in China and within Vietnam, not particularly, we haven't looked at the business schools, but we're certainly looking towards the forestry schools and the veterinary schools. Now, we're looking at veterinary schools for very much kind of clinical veterinary animal welfare, very technical stuff. But I think that just the more general kind of concepts of animal welfare is something which I'd really like us to be able to try to get into some of those really difficult curricula, which are currently not addressing them. Yet we know, particularly within the work we do in China, that many of the people which go on to be involved in some of the industries which we're trying to tackle are coming through forestry and veterinary schools or agricultural schools. So I think there's probably a lot of synergy there. If you can find a way of it working in business schools, then maybe we can find a sort of a way to work it in others. So I'll definitely be in touch with you if that's okay, to see whether there's a way of us collaborating and putting our heads together with that. That's great. I think it's a really essential part of our work. Laura, we've got one of the questions. It was actually we've got a question from one of the audience, which is something actually which I was going to ask you about as well. And this is when I've given talks in schools, both here in the UK, but also some of the educators that I work with in Vietnam and China. We often get the pushback in that the children pick up on all the information. They love it. They pick up and say, yes, you know, particularly when you're talking about veganism, you know, but then they go home and they say, I'm not going to eat my dinner because I've just heard about, you know, what happens to pigs or to cows or to hens. And then you get this negative feedback from the teachers. And I suppose the question is, can you share more about activities that you might have done to encourage students, parents to get involved with the change in the lifestyles that you're trying to encourage with children, and whether you've got any experience with that? And that's a similar thing which I was thinking about, was whether there was a way for us to involve the parents more as you're going into those schools, so that it's inclusive of the parents, so that they have a better understanding of the concept.
Yeah, that is an absolutely brilliant question. I'd like to say it doesn't. Does it fall in my remit? I don't know. What I do is I don't go into schools and don't get me wrong, I can do this if requested, but my work is to work with teachers and educators and train them. So I don't go into schools and do assemblies on what it means to be vegan. I can do if I'm asked to, but my work predominantly is about the educators and going into universities and speaking to teacher trainees. And so what I like to do is keep it at a very professional academic level, where I'm talking about changing policy and practice. So essentially, I get called into a school because a vegan parent has felt discriminated against and would like some help. I have done this in the past, where I've done vegan assemblies about what veganism is and what it means. I've done one at my daughter's own school, and there hasn't really been a pushback on that. It's kind of been accepted that what we're basically teaching you about is a little niche of humanity who follow this one way of life, and there hasn't really been much pushback. Now, I've seen it in newspaper articles. Recently, a head teacher here in the UK decided that for environmental reasons, they were going to stop serving meat and dairy, and they would have a plant-based menu. And it went horrifically, and there was a load of pushback, and then they pulled it, and now they're serving the standard school foods menu that they had done previously. The problem with that was that there was no consultation with the parents at all. Now, on the flip side, there is a very successful company. They're called the Plant-Based School Kitchens. They're only 1 year old, and they are down in the south of our country. And they provide plant-based food to a school that is a private school. And they had a huge consultation process. They brought in all the parents, all the children, everybody talked about it, and they've moved forward with it, and it's 100% successful. The kids love it. If they still want to bring in animal products in a packed lunch, they can do, but everything that's served in any way, shape or form, food, snacks, events, is always going to be plant-based. And that's amazing. So I would always be, to err on the side of caution, I would always be an advocate for consultation. If there was, for example, myself or somebody from a different organization coming in to speak about veganism, ensure that as a head teacher, you've looked at those resources and you've told the parents what it's about in one form or another, and just ensure that people coming in know what they're talking about, so that they aren't too biased, and so it doesn't, and just kind of, I just think that even though the pushback happens, if those children are going home and saying, I don't want to eat meat anymore, then depending on what their household looks like, eventually they'll either get supported or not and become vegan in the end. And so, but I do think that it's the job of the institution to just ensure that they are putting out all voices, sensible voices, And then the pushback is always going to happen in any social justice movement. We just still have to persevere.
Fabulous answer, Laura. Thanks very much for that. I've got another question, and this is something which I wanted to be involved in moderating this session because I've got a particular passion for education and how we can try to get our messages out there in an effective way. And one of the things which I think I've learned over many years of working on these on a number of campaigns is that sometimes maybe we are not giving people enough information to make the decisions on. We're talking a lot about maybe the cruelty and the suffering, and showing them that, you know, as the visuals of what's happening, but maybe we're not giving people the information about how the animals suffer or how the animals experience their world in a similar way to how we experience the world. So I wanted both of you really to give your thoughts on whether there was a space for us to kind of take a step back and to put within the curriculum things about animal sentience, animal emotions, cognitive abilities of animals, natural behaviors of animals, all on a positive footing, before we start talking about what we should do and how we should change behaviors, and whether you think that might give people a better grounding for then kind of saying, you know what, I get it. You're telling me, yeah, I get everything you're saying, because now I understand that hens are social animals and that they need to be with other hens, and they have these cognitive abilities and these emotional experiences. So Linda, do you want to respond to that? Your thoughts on whether that's something we could include in our sort of educational messages?
I think that's brilliant, Dave. I think that's a way forward, definitely, especially from in my discipline, in my field, in the business school. So foregrounding it with this animal sentience, cognitive aspect is really good. I'm now designing a course for the very first time that will be about this, about animals, and I have to somehow get it past our accreditation and academic board. And this is a great idea that I will steal from you. So, because there is so much information about it, and there's a lot of wonderful researchers out there specifically studying animal cognition. And so yes, absolutely. Great idea.
Great. Thanks, Linda. And Laura, your thoughts?
Yes, so I am a huge believer in the children who we teach in primary school, kindergarten. They love animals, and so non-human animals are a great tool to teach key skills through. And our curriculum does want teachers to talk about sentience and animal, what makes them special, but it just gets lost. So if we're supposed to teach about habitats and animals, but then when they go to a zoo to witness that, and it's just this disconnect. I absolutely would love a humane curriculum everywhere where we are taught about non-human animals and what makes them special, exactly as you have described. And that would be the most perfect place to start from. So that's why I work to create resources that do that and encourage educators to do that, because there's just absolute beauty will come from that. And it's like I said in my presentation, we, especially in this country, have been learning the same curriculum for so long now that there are grown adults who literally cannot understand veganism as a concept, or being kind to certain farmed animals as a thing that has to happen. And so in order for society to change and to view non-human animals as deserving of our respect, then the whole curriculum needs to completely start again. We need to go back to, the hundreds of thousands of years ago when we lived as tribes and we respected the land and the other animals around us. And do I think that's achievable in this modern society with all the technology and how far we've come? Well, yes, I do. I'd like to believe so. I'm always the optimist. It's difficult, but it requires people like ourselves to create wonderful resources, brilliant books such as Linda's, and keep moving that drive forward. It is achievable. It is.
Great, thanks, Laura. Really positive answer as well. And again, yeah, that's if we can work together on things like that, then I'd really love to. I say it is a real passion of mine, and I kind of see that one of the things I'm trying to do within Animals Asia is to try to get that message from that sort of scientific research side of the cognition and emotions of animals down into something which people can actually relate to, and to put it out there in a way which people can relate to on the ground, where they're not having to go into the scientific studies of it, you know. And so if there's a way of us bringing that into the curriculum and to the work that you're doing, then I'd really love to be able to work that. And it was really exciting to hear you, Linda, say that that's something which you might be able to put into the curriculum which you're developing. So, you know, let's keep in touch, because I'm happy to. I've got a lot of resources already which we're putting out there, and you know, I'm happy to share them, and you know, if we can find a way for it to work in one school, then there's no reason why we can't look to replicate it into others. So thanks for that. And then the other thing which I wanted to ask, which is always something which is really difficult for me to kind of get my head around about how to do it, is how to measure effectiveness of the messages which we give. I just wondered whether either of you had any experience from that, or had any tips really in terms of how we really measure that. I think education is always a really difficult one to measure, because we're literally looking for that behavior change, and that behavior change is not just, okay, I didn't, you know, I ate a plant-based meal on the day that you gave the talk. You know, we want to look at 10 years time and 15 years time and say, well, we influence people through that. So any kind of tips or ideas or difficulties that you have in really just measuring the effectiveness of the work that you're doing? Linda, if I put it to you first, and then Laura.
Yes, thank you very much for this question, because of course, especially in higher education, in universities and in the business school, this measurement aspect is very important. I don't have a great answer for it. What I would say is because again, it's longitudinal, it takes time. We don't know what's actually happening after 5 years, 10 years, when they're professionals out there making the decisions. We don't know how something we've said in the classroom or done during their education has impacted them. We'll only know that later on if we then do longitudinal studies on this, which we can do later on. But how I look at it is that, for example, I supervise a lot of master's and bachelor's degree theses, and looking at it from how many actually going from 0 to at least I have 1 or 2 per year now. That's something. And that means that every presentation that they do about their thesis, other students are also listening to this. So you encouraging students to be the advocates in a way by including this, and then the trickling out effects. And also trying to have, I think, your fingers in the game in many different places, such as conferences. I'm organizing a conference next month that has, for the first time, animals on the agenda in the business school. So these kind of things of trying to, I guess, in that way, seeing how many more voices for non-human animals then pop up when it comes to the agenda. It has improved. It has improved, but it's still limited.
I agree completely with that idea of other people getting involved, because I just had last weekend the world's first vegan inclusive education conference that I ran with a colleague of mine, and at that conference, there was somebody talking who was inspired by the book that I wrote. And then somebody was inspired from their work to do some research, and so on and so forth. And out of all of our 10 speakers, I think all but one had been inspired by someone else's work in the field. I think that was Dr. Richard Twine, who is an absolute, he didn't need to be inspired by us. We were all inspired by him. But I suppose, yeah, we were all inspired by each other, and the voices are growing. And one instance that I have, because it's difficult to measure, I agree with Linda completely, difficult to measure actually how much reach you have. I get the occasional email of a parent saying such a body has done this and changed that, and I think it's lovely, but I haven't got any formal way of collating all of that feedback. But something interesting happened to me last week, where my daughter's year 4 teacher, she's 9 years old now, handed me a book at the door and said, would you read this over the weekend to see if it's suitable for her lessons next half term? And I read it and I just cried my eyes out in my car, just on my own, just so emotional, because it was called The Zoo. My expectations of it were that it was just, oh God, why has he handed me this book about the zoo? But it was from the animal's perspective, and it was beautiful. And the very last sentence in the book was, do you believe that animals dream? And it just absolutely floored me. And I remember hosting my first ever vegan inclusive staff training session, and he was there 4 years ago. And this is where it's come to. This is where it's come to. And I know up and down the country, all of the schools that I've visited and intend on visiting will have teachers asking parents, is this book available for us to use? And that's all I can hope for currently, until it's so big that perhaps I will be able to collate some quantitative data. For now, it's all qualitative and all positive.
Thanks, Laura. That is really inspiring, actually, and really fabulous to hear. Really encouraging. Well, I mean, I am going to be in touch with both of you, and because you're both inspiring me personally with your work and your enthusiasm for what you're doing. We've run out of time, I'm afraid to say. I think I could just carry on chatting, and maybe we can set up a session sometime. We can all come back on and chat, because I think, we've got so much crossover in what we're doing and the way that we're thinking, and I'm sure we can all come together and put our heads together to keep moving forward. So just a huge thank you to you, Linda, to you, Laura, and also to Dr. Wadchara, who can fortunately be with us here, but I'm sure we'll be watching this at a later date. And for everybody else for being here, for listening to this. A really great session. Thanks very much. And please continue to enjoy the rest of the Asia Farm Animal Day sessions in the days to come. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you, Dave, Laura, and Dr. Topper for being here, and also Dr. Wadchara as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining our sessions.
Thanks, Nakam.
Yeah. Have a nice day, everybody.
Bye, everybody.